Hi, Jessica. Welcome to Web3 Digital Marketing Entrepreneur Podcast. It's so great to have you here. So please tell a little bit about yourself and how you started, your journey in this metaverse space and everything.
Oh, well, that's probably a longer conversation than we have time for, but I appreciate being here and love having these conversations. I am a licensed psychologist by trade, and we're getting close to about 20 years ago now. I started to really look into and explore the value of incorporating digital tools into mental health treatment. I am a registered play therapist, and that means that I have a specialty of working with children and utilizing their language of play and their natural inclination and interest in engaging in play. But it doesn't mean that it's only children who play, right?
Yeah.
We adults, we love to play. It can be something as overt as a game, video, or otherwise. It can be banter. It can be something active. We human beings love to play. So taking my interest and knowledge of play and putting that together with my acknowledgement and interest and knowledge in the digital realm, I said we really need to explore what value is here. And that led me to a whole host of different topics and different hardware and software and utilizations and diagnoses and all of that. So I come through this in very much by way of interest and passion.
Got it. And so I'm really a firm believer of this foundations because, for example, the main reason why I started a podcast back in 2017 was I had a heartbreak, and I was like, I need to find a way to push myself, so I started a podcast. But as a psychologist, I'm sure you would have some sort of foundation for why you started or something that triggered you to pursue this path. Is there anything as such?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So really it was my own children. And initially, so I'm not going to publicly broadcast my age, but I am not young and I did not grow up with all of this. I am not a digital native. So I remember the days when we didn't have answering machines, when the phone rang and if you didn't pick it up, you didn't know who it was, you didn't know what was happening. So I didn't come by this of way of it's just part of my life and I'm just incorporating it. I actually like that very much because it means that I was able to look at it more objectively and say, what is the value here? What is really, what are the human components? What does this speak to as human beings? So when my children were young, I have 4 children total, and the oldest is close to 26. When he was young, and his closest sibling, they had interest in different games that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about RuneScape, and the two of them would just have these grand conversations in the back of the car on the way home from school, where, whatever it might be at home. And I, didn't completely understand a lot of what they were talking about, didn't understand why it was so interesting to them, couldn't participate in the conversations. And yet they had such excitement and interest in this. I thought, I need to learn more about this. Even at a parental level, I need to know more about what my children are engaging in. And so I made an account and I joined the game, and not to hover over them or intrude or anything. I asked them, I talked to them about it. They thought it was fantastic that I wanted to learn more. And as I went in, I started to notice a couple of things. One, I was experiencing why, at least to a small level, because I will be completely honest, and my clients, if they hear this, will be giggling because I am not very good at a lot of these games. And on some level, it doesn't matter. I go in, I explore, I understand, I can have the conversations. When my children would be in the back seat talking about it, I would be able to at least understand, if not include myself. Sometimes we would co-play, so we would be in there together, multiplayer, online MMO. So I I was able to enter their world in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And I thought, look at all the value there is for my own children and my relationship. There has to be value for my clients, for the families, for the relationships that are happening all over, no matter the age and no matter who it is. So that really sent me off on this journey.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And you're really cool that, you wanted to learn the gaming part of, what your children does. Because I really can imagine that whenever I am playing this Grand Theft Auto, GTA, and
Mhm.
my mom, she will be, it was back in my school days, and my mom will be asking me, when will you come and have dinner? And I'll be like, I'll just die right now by the police, and then I'll come. Why do you always say you have to die? You have to die. Why can you just quit the game and come? So it's pretty interesting, and you're really cool, to get to know about that, games and stuff. And you mentioned that your children started to work on the VR stuff and everything. I've been seeing a lot of like reports and news that VR has been used on elderly people, like somewhat people they don't know, who couldn't go out and stuff. But this is the first time kind of hearing VR being used for the children's health and stuff. Would you care to come, tell a little bit more about how it's being used and anything that's new happening in the field?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, virtual reality really under the heading and umbrella of extended reality. So
Mm.
virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, there's so much growth happening in all of those directions. And I'm really interested to see how it's going to expand in the next years. In regards to mental health, particularly virtual reality, let's just hone in on that one. Virtual reality can be used with all ages. I have clients of all ages and have had great success using it in a number of different situations and arenas. I think the key thing about it for me, what it boils down to, because I'm very much a person who likes to identify components of things. What are the cornerstones? What are the if you distill it down to the least common denominator, what are
Mm.
those pieces that really are critical? And so in this, one of the things I've distilled it down to is that the opportunity to be completely immersed
Mm.
in an environment, your brain, your body, your everything believes you're in that environment. So much so that when I teach other therapists how to use virtual reality in mental health treatment, I had a client, I mean, not a client, I'm sorry, a student
Mm.
who, in the middle of the class, you could see him in his headset and he was taking off his controllers and went to put them on a shelf. And there was no shelf. The shelf was what he could see in the headset,
Yeah.
but physically, there wasn't a shelf to put his controllers on. And he took his headset off and started to giggle because he's like, I really believed that shelf was there. That's just a little minor example of how much your mind and body believes that the environment you're in is what you're actually experiencing. And if we extend that out at any age to the ability to have the mind and body in an environment that could be purposely chosen and engaged with in a way that helps further their mental health process, that is phenomenal. Because historically, over hundreds of years, psychology has been either relay to me what's in your mind,
Mm.
relay to me, tell me what that looks like, what does that feel like.
Yeah.
My brain then has to interpret what you've just told me. So
Mm.
it's so many generations. It's what you actually see in your head, experience in your body and your mind and your everything, right? Then you have to change it into and translate that into language
Mm.
And we're not even talking about if it's a second language for somebody or a third language.
Yeah.
We're talking about just translating it into language, then expressing that verbally to another person who then hears it auditorily, goes into their ears, then their brain has to process the language and turn it into something visual or experiential. There are so many steps along. It's like the game of telephone. There are so many steps along that way that could be interpreted differently than what that person's initial experience or visualization is. In virtual reality, we have the ability to translate the needs of the clients into environments and experiences that help them have a more powerful and therefore impactful experience in their mental health journey.
Interesting. And the point that you mentioned about the your student like couldn't actually believe that there was no shelf there. So imagining in previous psychology there were like hypnotisms, and there were like clocks, like the sticking and stuff, and watches, and so is this kind of the same stuff but in a virtual reality where I mean, I'm not saying that you're like therapists are hypnotizing people, but in a way that they're kind of improving their thoughts towards the world. Because I've had a couple of VR developers in my show, and they mentioned that when a new person is putting the VR headset, and they'll feel motion sickness or dizziness kind of feelings, because their brain can't actually process that you're not actually there, but you feel like you're there and you're moving forward. So it doesn't have any side effects, this VR stuff. I mean, a lot of people definitely ask this, because I was about to buy a VR headset. In the Indian market, it's pretty new. It's really, really new. And there's not a lot of service centers here. So I'm really hesitant to invest that much amount right now into that. But when my mom Googled it, she was like, you will lose eyesight, you will lose dizziness. Like, she just listed a lot of things. So what do you think the VR side effects are? Anything that's caused a major problem, at least?
So my response to that is multi-layered. So backing up again to these cornerstones that I like to distill things into, is that I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Digital Play Therapy. And in that book, I talked about what I termed techno panic. So we have historically, we have terms like moral panic. And I took some of those aspects and turned it into techno panic. So basically, the idea of that is, throughout the time of human beings, anytime something is new, there are concerns. It could be to the point of what we have I'm sure there's some other version of it in every culture, but like Chicken Little, just running through the town, like the town crier of, this is danger, 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 right? So there are important aspects of that. It is phenomenally important, and I keep saying that word, but it's so important for us to look at all sides of something. Nothing is going to be the end all be all of everything, and we must analyze anything new to determine, even if it's not in, say, a mental health treatment, just the general use, right? So initially, when virtual reality became more of a household term after it was brought more into commercialization, and it wasn't a whole room like Sutherland's. I don't know if you've seen the Sword of Damocles, the whole room thing that looked like this big octopus on someone's head. It's just heavy and all of that. But once we became more commercialized, there were a lot more conversations about simulation sickness, which is what you're describing with that nausea, or the queasiness of the movement and whatnot. We've come so far in that. I'm not saying nobody gets simulation sickness any longer, but for development and then also the headsets themselves, there are so many things to mitigate that. It's basically like when you're in a car, if you're looking forward versus looking to at the side window, your vestibular system has to catch up and recognize what the movement means and how that gets translated in the brain. And if it doesn't match up, then you're going to feel that queasiness. Things like how quickly somebody moves or what type of movement they have, the locomotion in virtual reality will make a big difference in those kinds of things. And then again, the optics and the audio and how things match up or don't. Our brains don't like it when things don't match up. So the more we can make them match up, the less those kinds of things are going to happen. I think it's important for people to explore. For me personally, I'll give an example. So in locomotion, there's smooth locomotion, which basically is like you're on a hoverboard and you're just gliding across. And then there's teleportation. And there are a couple different kinds of that. But basically that I use my controller, there's an arc and a indicator of where I'm going to land. And when I let go of my trigger, then I land there. It's sort of like, boop, I just transported right over there. For me personally, and this is not true for everybody, smooth locomotion does not do good things for me. I end up feeling dizzy. I end up not feeling well. No matter how slowly I go, no matter whatever, it just doesn't match up for me. But if I teleport, I have no problem whatsoever. So I always advocate go into the settings on your headset itself, go into the settings on any software, look what's possible, adjust where is necessary, try out the different things, and that will help you figure out what works for you. For me, teleportation all the way. I don't even mess with the smooth locomotion. I go straight in, change my settings, all good. Then the other things like the eyes, and there are some thoughts about like the weight of the headset for the neck. You can find information in both directions. Dr. Skip Rizzo out of USC, I just went to a conference a couple of weeks ago in Philadelphia, and he was talking about studies that show pretty definitively that it is not the optics or the distance or any of that is the concern. They were looking particularly for children. That is, it's not the eye itself and the physical headset that is the concern. It's the content. So those are very interesting findings that have been coming out from ophthalmologists. So that was actually an ophthalmologist who had done the study, and so I think these things are things for us to absolutely look at. And I think that we have to keep in mind that there is a level of techno-panic, which can bring us to the point of making either not so great analyses because we jump on the bandwagon and we don't really look further into it. Or, which is my preferred method, is that we take those and look into them further, which is exactly what this study that Dr. Rizzo was talking about was basically, this has been a stated concern. Let's look into that further and determine whether or not there is some merit there.
So content, as you mentioned, like, from the research, like what sort of content is actually there? Is it possible to explain for you that?
Oh, well, we're speaking particularly about children. And so it's what kind of software is available, and what kind of software they're going to have access to, what kind of interactions they're going to have, those kinds of things, just like we would with any 2D video game as well. Like you were talking about GTA earlier, there are some parents who will decide that their children aren't old enough or mature enough to play that game. And at some point they might be, depending on the family values and whatnot. So that's what I mean, the content. I just brought up GTA because you did. I'm not trying to pick on any certain program or anything. I'm more saying that for children, it is a family value conversation. And paired with that is, in my opinion, the importance of parents actually and caregivers actually experiencing the programs themselves instead of listening to societal anything and making determinations from that. We don't want to say, oh, I heard XYZ, that game is horrible. Like, for instance, Fortnite. For a while, there's so much conversation about Fortnite, like all of how bad Fortnite is. And yes, it is a first-person shooter. Like there are things about that, but there are also a lot of really valuable things that can happen in Fortnite. And for particular clients, I have found that to be an amazing tool to use in therapy. So, but I didn't know that until I tried it for myself. And that really was the important key piece. And then there are other games or programs that I'll try, and I'm like, I don't really see the therapeutic value in it, except for the idea that we are entering into our client's world and listening to the things that are important to them. But the actual like use of it in a session, I think that really has more to do with the therapeutic goals and those type of conversations.
Makes sense. And one point you mentioned that I want to follow up is that the commercialization of the VR headsets. To be honest, this VR market, has been, online for a really long time. To be honest, like every other technology. But since Facebook, converted their, whole business model into this VR side, the growth or the visibility of that market has been growing enormously. So before this happening, like Facebook changing the name to Meta or virtual reality, how was the VR in healthcare market? I mean, I'm sure you have been there for a pretty long time. I mean, was it like really still booming, compared to now, or was it like really in a normal phase?
So, I mean, way back when, most of the virtual reality use was really in military, and
Hmm.
that is like, the early days, decades and decades ago. So once it grew out of that, and then it started getting in more into the research and academic arenas, and then as you're saying, it grew into the more commercial market.
Hmm.
The when so my husband and I have a product called Virtual Sandtray, and
Hmm.
it's basically taking an almost 100-year-old technique that's used in therapy and giving it a digital platform to be used. And so in about 2015, I said to my husband, this really needs, because we started in 2011, and this really needs to be in VR. Like I just wholeheartedly think that we need to put it in VR. And at the time when I would speak about that, people would look at me like I had three heads. Why, what are you talking about? We aren't even wanting to incorporate digital anything. And you're talking, that's 2D, and they wouldn't even use those terms, but I'm using them here. That's computer or tablet or something like that. Now you're virtual reality. What? You're completely bonkers. And I could just see people's faces if I would be in like a some sort of a presentation or something I was doing. So initially, particularly with mental health, things are very slow to change. The funny thing is I read a book from the 1930s where the author said mental health practitioners are very slow to change. And that was in the 1930s. That's almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And the statement is still true today. And I believe wholeheartedly that that has a lot to do with practitioners not wanting to do any harm.
Hmm.
They want to make sure that what they're introducing to their clients and in session actually is healthy, is beneficial, is all the things, all the protective things. And I think that it comes from often a place of wanting to make sure they're doing no harm and that they're actually doing good for their clients. I also think because of the digital divide, where we have people who were not brought up with these tools and whatnot, there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of uh, unknown. And
Hmm.
so not only the part about the client and making sure the client is taken care of, but also the part for the clinician themselves is just like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to incorporate it well. And so you have some pushback in a couple of different directions. Of course, then the pandemic
Yeah.
came, and then things had to change so quickly in so many ways. I don't know that a lot of people were doing VR therapy during the pandemic, because a lot of therapists were and clinicians were just adjusting to everything else about it. I was holding VR groups,
Hmm.
and we would all meet in our headsets. I was using VR in my individual sessions. So I was on that path, but not many people were. Now you can see it growing quite a bit. Is
Yeah.
it slow? Yes. Is it small? Yes. But it is exponentially larger than it was even in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, I can pretty much feel that because so I've been reading a lot of blogs, regarding this VR and metaverse in healthcare. I mean, the main reason why I wanted to enter this space is because when since I'm a digital marketer by nature, so but I work in a Web3 company, so that company deals with metaverse and everything. And when we explored that metaverse area, I found that the collection of data that a VR headset can do is pretty amazing. Like how much understanding you can get from being in a VR world. I mean, mostly people use focus groups and stuff like that. But today, there's nothing like that. Today, like everyone wants to do Zoom, but Zoom has been like it's been created into a bad word. For Zoom fatigue, like it created into a verb sort of thing. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why it was pretty interesting for me to explore this area. And the COVID, like you mentioned, it literally messed up a lot of people's mental health, and using Zoom, and a lot of people became therapists themselves. So in that area, one thing I want to clarify is you mentioned that clinicians are even afraid to take this forward, like because they don't sometimes know what they're doing it. Is there any particular course or things, certificates that they need to do in order to take this VR and incorporate it in their normal therapy?
I I think that anytime a clinician brings something new into their practice, whatever that might be, whatever kind of technique or modality or anything, our I would imagine this is true most parts of the world. Our ethical guidelines require us to become competent in whatever that is. And so, how do we acquire competence? Typically, that is through education of some sort. That is training, that is reading, that is research. And I don't mean conducting research in a lab. I mean researching, looking, reading the articles, finding out as much information as you can, rabbit hole deep diving into the different components that come up for you. As I have a question about this, like you said, I have a question about what's the impact on the eyes, what is this simulation sickness. I want to learn more and more about that, so that either you can uh, mitigate those different concerns, you can understand them better, so that if you need to give informed consent, you want to say to your client, this could happen, that could happen, you know, any of those concerns, you want to be knowledgeable in
Mhm.
those arenas before you bring anything into your clinical practice. And using something of a digital nature is no different.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So before moving on to the final section, this is a question I always ask my guests and kind of an out of the box stuff. So is it morning or evening there? What time is it?
It is late morning.
Late morning. Okay. Okay. So the question is, who was actually the last person that you made smile yesterday?
The last person I made smile yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, if you'd asked me today, which you didn't, so I'm going to give you both answers. But if
Sure.
you'd asked me today, I have, for the last 7 months, I have been acting as the chief psychology officer for a virtual reality company. And I can't speak to what we're working on because it's, high secret and all of that kind of stuff. But the company is called Ascendant VR. And just a couple of hours ago, we had a meeting with someone I had worked with previously in the past. And I think we all left that meeting with big smiles on our faces, because something we've been wrestling with looks like it's going to be able to get managed. So I think I'm still riding high off of the smile of that meeting from a couple of hours ago. But you asked me about yesterday, and I think the person that I probably had helped to smile last was probably my youngest son, who is almost 14, and his siblings are all elsewhere, and I was able to take him out to dinner, just the two of us, and just have like a connecting, when you can connect with an almost 14-year-old boy and have some laughs and giggles in there, that's a pretty special moment. So those are two of the last smilings.
Nice. Wow, you're really cool. Nice to hear that. Great. So, just moving to the final section is that, so you mentioned that you're helping a lot of clients, regarding the psychology and stuff. So I just like to explore a little bit about, what you do. It would be great for the audience to hear about it as well.
So here in the United States, as a licensed psychologist, one of the really big benefits that came out of the pandemic experience has been an expansion of our licensing. So if you go through what's called PSI-PACT, and you jump through all the hoops and you meet all the criteria, it's not just a, sign up and you're done. You have to really qualify for this. But once you qualify, then you are licensed in the states that are participating. And right now, I believe, my last count anyway, it's like 33 states in the United States that I am now licensed in. Before, we could not cross state lines. So if I was in Colorado, which I am now, and my client was in Arizona, I would not be able to see that person, one, because they're in Arizona, and two, because my license wouldn't cover me seeing that person in that state. Now, with virtual sessions and with the expansion of the licensing for certain disciplines, clients have the ability to seek out services that fit for them. I hear all the time, we have been to so many people and it hasn't worked, and we've been referred to you. And these are people that I have not met with face to face. These are people that are across the country, and my services speak to them in some particular way. And often, not always, but often that includes different technologies such as virtual reality. So both of us need to have a headset. And for some programs, one person could be 2D. There's a really fun program called Akron. One person's in a headset, everyone else. So I do family therapy with that, and everyone else is on a mobile device, kinds of things. But for the most part, they have a headset, I have a headset, and then we meet in multiplayer environments. There are all sorts of considerations that go into that, and we won't have time for the details of those things, but you want to make sure that you are communicating verbally through your 2D Zoom or whatever platform you're using. In the United States, we have to have that be HIPAA compliant, so we have to have certain levels of protection in there. I don't advocate at any time communicating through the chat, or either written or verbal. The only reason I would advocate that, actually, a caveat would be if you wanted to see social interactions, intentionally wanted to see and experience social interactions in a multiplayer environment with the client. Maybe they're having some social difficulties or whatever, but it would be an outlier. It would be intentional, and there would be therapeutic reasons. And you would talk about the potential pitfalls of that ahead of time. So in the informed consent arena. But for the most part, it's engaging with my clients in an environment, just the two of us. There's a program called Township Tale. You go in, it's kind of medieval-esque. You go in, you can build different things, gather different materials, all of that. And it can be just the two of you with a customized avatar. It's always interesting to hear and see what people's thought process is to go through of choosing and creating their avatar. You learn about somebody from that. So there are a lot of different components to it. I think I answered your question, just sort of the mechanics of it, how you would interact and explore, like go in, watch YouTube videos on different programs, see what your clients' needs are, and see if there are programs out there that will meet those needs.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And considering all the license and all the things that you mentioned, I think slowly and steadily there's a lot of improvements happening in the VR space. And I recently saw this news. I don't know how much of this is true, that some insurance company is going to cover the like a therapy or something that's going to happen in the VR space also. So it's going to cover the insurance cost of that. So yeah, I think that's a lot of great things are happening. And Jessica, thanks so much, for explaining all the things, very clearly and stuff. So right now, tables turned. Is there anything else that you want to ask me?
I don't think so. I am curious. So maybe if you have a second to answer that, I'm curious of what your thought process is now of whether or not you're going to get a headset, recognizing it's a significant investment for sure.
Yeah. So investment is one part, because since I've been working in this environment, it would really help me as a content creator also to give more authority to what I do. The main problem here in my state is that since it's pretty new, the Indian VR market is not like pretty established yet, especially when it comes to MetaQuest. It's not pretty established yet. So if I'm buying one, if in case anything's happening to my headset, then I'm done. I don't have anywhere. I have to go at least like 500 kilometers to a different state and get that repaired and come. So that's only thing that's kind of like stopping me from doing so. And like I said, as a marketing person, I really love new ways where people explore, because I really believe that any new technology that comes in will somehow turn into a marketing front. Being a marketing guy, that's what my mindset obviously will be. So that's one of the reasons why it's kind of like just the service centers and stuff is really kind of stopping me from buying it. I still have that in my cart. I just haven't placed the order yet. So yeah, maybe when
I
I do.
I I don't want to be insensitive to the distance and the amenities and all of that. I don't want to be insensitive to that at all. And at the same time, I want to say, click purchase, go for it.
Exactly. And right now, I think, Meta is kind of really pushing the headsets to people to buy. They are like, reducing the cost and all of the headsets,
Yes.
they're really pushing, because I think the Meta Quest 3 is sort of coming. So that's why they're
Yes.
pushing that. So yeah, this is a good time for me to buy. So I really have to go and push that button, I guess.
Yes, I would absolutely. And then I want to hear from you what your experience is, because it's one thing to talk about it and it's one thing to experience it. And
Exactly.
it'll be a whole new world.
Exactly, because I'm really not much of a traveler. I do travel sometimes, but since this is kind of my whole setup by having here, and if I'm not moving, then I at least I can do something with it, with the headsets, and then try to go somewhere and try to at least improve my brain, I guess. I think that's what I want to. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I go all over the world frequently. There are different programs. My favorite one is Wander, and you put in a
Mhm.
location and there you are, and you're looking at the Eiffel Tower, or you're in Egypt looking at the pyramids, or you're visiting your childhood home or someplace that's significant to you. So I use that all the time. So I agree with you. It's pretty fun to play games, but also then to go into other programs, experiences. The Anne Frank house, you can do a whole tour of that. Like, there are just so many things that you can do that I could just keep talking on and on and on. So I will stop, but push purchase when you're able to do that, and I think you're gonna love it.
Sure, and I hopefully when this episode is published, I will have bought that headset. So when I'm sending you the link, I'll send you a selfie as well. Making sure that I'm wearing the headset. So yeah, I'll try to do my best on
Perfect.
that. Great.
Love it.
Awesome. So Jessica, thanks again, for hopping onto the show. And if in case people want to find you or your services, where they can do, if you can list them out, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So I have a website. It's my name, jessicastonephd.com. And then, being of the older generation, I'm also on Facebook, and I have a couple of things going on. I have a digital play therapy page where you can get a bunch of resources. I also have started a mental health virtual reality international coalition, so MHVR International Coalition. And you can find information on LinkedIn. Just look at my name. You can find me on LinkedIn. I put some information there on that. And then also there's a Facebook page about the MHVR involvement. We would love to have people international, like I said. So we have little pods that have different meeting times. We come together, we're writing white papers, we're looking at standards. We're exploring so many different aspects in development, in education, clinical. We would love to have people join that. So those are some of the key places that they can find me.
Awesome. So guys, I'll definitely link every, link in the description below, so you can go and check it out. And Jessica, thanks again for hopping onto the show. And guys, I'll see you in the next episode.